In her book, Listening to Ayahuasca, psychologist Dr. Rachel Harris shares about her own experiences with ayahuasca and draws upon her original research into the powerful healing effects of the medicine. I hope that you'll enjoy this recent conversation that I had with Rachel about the book. So let's start by having you explain what ayahuasca is for those who don't know.
Okay, great. It's a great question. Even though the word is coming up in a lot of media and TV and movies, people still don't know what it is. And it's a tea that has been used in the Amazon for thousands of years. And it's used as a medicine. And it does a lot of different things in the Amazon. But Westerners are drinking it for different reasons, more psychological reasons. In the Amazon, it's used more as a medicine. It removes parasites, for instance, not something we're concerned about. So it's used for quite different reasons.
So it's more physical than psychological there.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what made ayahuasca become popular in the West, or when did that happen?
You know, it's been happening for the last 2 decades or so, and I think because it's such a strong psychospiritual, I call it like a rocket ship boost to your psychospiritual growth. And Westerners have been very interested in that kind of work. And so here's this medicine that just kind of moves them along very quickly. And I think that's been the draw. When they do research asking people who travel to the Amazon, why are you seeking this experience in the jungle? It's not easy to get there. People mostly talked about their psychospiritual interests, that that's what they wanted it for.
And what inspired you to decide to start researching ayahuasca?
You know, after my very first experience, which I sort of just kind of fell into, I wasn't looking for it, and I was in a situation where I could drink it in a safe way with an authentic shaman. The next morning, I was struck by how therapeutic my experience was. And I woke up with all kinds of questions that, of course, nobody could answer. And the shaman really didn't care. I mean, I was asking therapy questions. How does this work? How did it do it? How did I have this experience? I went back to the moment when my dad died, the day or two before he died. He was in my home, and I had this incredibly opening experience as he was dying. And that replayed in my first ayahuasca experience. I lived it through again as if it were happening real. So it was this wonderful therapeutic opportunity and spiritual. It was really a mystical experience that I had. And that sparked all my interest.
Yeah. And so your background is
I'm a psychologist. And so I have a research and a psychotherapy background. So I was asking research questions about the therapeutic value of this medicine.
And had any research like that been done before?
You know, the kinds of therapy questions are very hard to research. Right. There has been developing research about what is ayahuasca and how and biochemically how does it work. But so I report on that, some of the functional MRIs that relate to it. But the therapy questions of how does this experience replay something so powerful as a parent's death? This is very mysterious for us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you give us an example or two of the kinds of healing stories that you discovered through your research?
Well, the one that I'm describing is where I relived an intense experience. There are other experiences where people watch episodes from their childhood as if they're watching a TV show. So they have some distance. They're not in the scene. They're watching the scene. And that's an important distinction. Sometimes people are in the scene and re-experiencing it 3 years old, 2 years old. For me, I went back to something that happened 7 years previous when my dad died. And then there's the objectivity of watching a scene unfold. And these are different therapeutic opportunities that need to be worked with differently in a therapy session after the ceremony. Not many people go for therapy after the ceremony, mind you. Right. But as a therapist, I'm a proponent of that. I think there's enormous value that can come from having an opportunity to go over your experience with a therapist and take a look at it. And then the therapist would need to know there's just a different angle of working with someone who has taken ayahuasca, but someone who relived an experience versus someone who watched it like a movie. Mm-hmm. It's just a slightly different way of working with that.
Right. Right. And the subtitle of your book is New Hope for Depression, Addiction, PTSD, and Anxiety. So are those areas where it's been especially...
It covers the waterfront.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have added more words to the book title.
Yeah.
Because people have these spontaneous cures that they report where they say, well, all of a sudden I'm eating healthier and I've started exercising.
Uh-huh.
And, I joke and say, well, psychologists have been trying to get people to eat healthier for a very long time, and we're not very successful. For some people, there's what I call a miraculous cure, where there's an immediate change in them and in their lives. And they stop drinking. I mean, one woman said, I stopped having casual sex. I mean, people shared a lot of intimate information. I started exercising. I became vegetarian. I mean, there's a whole range of things that happen spontaneously. So the title could have been longer. And some people the same way report about depression. All of a sudden, I'm not, a depression that I've lived with my whole life has lifted. It's a miraculous cure. We can't explain the mechanics of it, but I got enough first-person reports that it's clear this happens. Not to everyone. And some people have to come back for repeated sessions or regular use of ayahuasca in order to have that kind of benefit. And who's going to have a spontaneous remission? Who's going to have repeated sessions? We can't predict ahead of time. There's more that we don't know than that we know. But what is clearly reported is that this is a medicine that is extremely helpful for people who are suffering.
Wow. And how did you collect your research?
Well, this is sort of underground research, as the whole work with ayahuasca is underground, because the tea is a combination of two plants, and they're plants from the jungle, but once they're mixed, they release DMT, which is a psychedelic, and that's illegal. So my research was done in an underground, with underground people participating, and it was a rolling kind of finding subjects. So someone would know someone who would know someone,
right.
and the everything was confidential and anonymous. Even so, people would, first of all, the research questionnaire was 16 pages long, which is ridiculous. It took hours to fill out. And there were essay questions. People filled it out. They wrote me personal letters. They wanted to share what this medicine was doing for them in their lives. So, the research kind of just flowed from people knowing each other, but the enthusiasm for the research and wanting professionals to know that this is a valuable medicine was very high, very strong.
So because ayahuasca is illegal in the U.S., how accessible is it for people who want to try it?
Well, it's illegal and everything's word of mouth. Yeah. And I'm sorry to say, since it is illegal, there's no regulation. You don't know, even if you get a good referral, you don't really know who you're going to work with, who's going to be there, how many helpers there are going to be, or what you're going to drink. There is no way to know. And so this is not an easy situation, and I don't encourage people. If some people feel called, and that arises in them in many different ways. Some people begin to dream about ayahuasca. I had one man who talked to me, and he said, I just heard about ayahuasca. I've been nauseous for days. I'm not sick. Nausea is a part of the medicine.
I was going to ask about that too.
Often nausea or vomiting, purging, they call it. He said, I know this is from even just thinking about it, and that I'm being called. So it's not easy to find. And then, the book is full of warnings about be careful.
What advice would you have to offer someone who's interested in trying ayahuasca?
Yeah, the most important thing I say is to be careful. Even a referral from someone you know well doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be comfortable in the situation that they were comfortable in. So there was a recent article in The New Yorker about ayahuasca, and the author went to a ceremony in Brooklyn next to a bar with music and sound coming through from the bar, and with a yoga teacher who was a so-called shaman. I mean, it was a missed opportunity for the article, But this is what you get when you follow a referral. You somehow have to really check things out very carefully. And you're really looking for someone who is a serious practitioner. And that means they've been working with this medicine for decades,
Right.
not years,
Right.
not a few years, not 7 years, not 10 years, decades, multiple decades.
And tell us a little bit more about the physical reaction, because I know that it has quite a reputation for that. Is it as bad as it seems?
Yes. The answer is yes, and not for everybody. Some people have wonderful mystical experiences and they're comfortable. Personally, I'm nauseous almost the whole time, and my mantra is, I'm never doing this again. So you might wonder, well, why does she do it again? Because I have not gotten any better. I'm not a warrior. I'm not strong. It's very difficult for me. And I think mostly I do it for the days that follow, for the weeks that follow, for the after effect. There's sort of a golden therapeutic opportunity for self-reflection, for real therapy work, for transformation. And that's what's most important to me.
It's interesting because I think anything that's really worthwhile integrates the darkness and the light. It's not
that's
just
a nice way to put it.
Yeah, so it's like you kind of have to have that part of it.
There's plenty of hard work that goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was doing the research, I got so many ecstatic, responses. I began to actually look for people who'd had a bad trip.
Mm-hmm.
And people would report, a really awful trip, or I was anxious, for days, or different versions of a bad trip. But then they would always have this final summary, I'm still glad I did it, it was so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone that wasn't glad?
Well, I didn't find them.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been some reported deaths. There have been some people, rare, who have a psychotic break. But that's a possibility with a lot of different kinds of medicines, and it's very rare, and a lot depends on the setting and the situation.
Yeah.
And the most important thing, especially for any panic attacks or anxiety, is that people stay with you.
Right. So you have that support.
So you have that support. And that's the same as the kind of support that's given in harm reduction situations at music festivals and that sort of thing, where somebody is willing to stay with you throughout your experience just to keep you calm.
Right. And what do you most hope people will take away from your book, Listening to Ayahuasca?
Yeah. Well, my prejudice is as a therapist. So I wrote the book to help people make the most therapeutically of their experience and to encourage them to work with a therapist. And then I also, because I talk a lot about therapy, working with spiritual experiences, I hope that therapists will benefit from the book and be better able to work with people who are having these kinds of unusual experiences.
Right.